If you're going to live in a world where you swipe right and you can have sex within 20 minutes, then the rules of engagement are different.
Obviously, men and women are having sexual encounters that they are interpreting in radically different ways.
Why do men still think it's okay to send women random, unsolicited pictures of their penises?
It's a sexual consent app. Two people are getting hot and heated. One pulls out a phone and say, hey, read this contract, state your name for the record, sign here, and now let's get it on.
We have the most singles that we've had in modern history.
When is no, no? When is yes, yes?
Hello, everyone. I'm Zainab Selvi. I'm the executive editor and host of the PBS series Me Too, Now What? And author of Freedom is an Inside Job. And I am here to talk with you about sex. Well, it's not only sex, it's really sex, flirting, dating, relationships, consent, and all the things that we're trying to navigate in this new era that was not only brought about by Me Too, but in our current time of technology and apps and all of these things. And I have a great panel with me who needs no introduction, and I will start with Joanna Coles, the Chief Content Officer of Hearst Magazine and the author of a new book, Love Rules, just came out. Now, Joanna, I want to bring Aziz Ansari's case. He's like the comedian who actually, more than any case in the last few months since Me Too movement came out, his issue with hooking up with a woman, and he did not fail to read, according to her verbal and nonverbal messages. How does that? What is your take on the consent issue in the Me Too era?
Well, it's incredibly interesting, and I do think that, as well as Me Too, the digital area and digital dating apps have completely changed the way that people communicate. And I'm all for them. This is not an anti-digital book. It's full of enthusiasm for love and the stuff that makes us feel alive. But what happens when you communicate back and forth with a stranger who you've both matched each other on a digital app is that you begin this computer-mediated communication, which is not the same as communication that you have in real life like we're doing here. You don't have all five senses on fire. You can't tell, actually, if you're going to like this person. All you can do is have a witty exchange with them. And what happens is there are four selves at work here. There are the two computer selves, and then there are the two real-life selves. And I think what happened in this situation is that she fell in love with the concept of Aziz Ansari, the one that she'd been texting back and forth with, and the one, of course, that she felt she knew because he's a celebrity. And when she sat down with him, he didn't turn out to be the person she wanted him to be, and he didn't turn out to be the person that she wanted to go to bed with, although she ended up having all sorts of sexual acts with him. And I worry that we now spend so much time on our devices that we've become voyeurs of other people's lives, and we're failing to participate and take agency in our own.
Well, it's very true, very true. And Lauren, I want to take it to you because you're a journalist and a political columnist for Teen Vogue. Do you think there's a generational divide on how women are processing and dealing with the issues of consent?
Absolutely. I could not have been more frustrated with the dialogue around the Aziz Ansari case. It was complicated. There were gray areas. I think that it showed this sort of moral panic within the Me Too movement in which we struggle for how to process something in which there is not an obvious condemnation. There's not an obvious black and white, here's a villain, here's the victim. And I think that we need to be able to have a more nuanced conversation about consent. And if we're talking in generalizations here generationally, there seem to me to be a younger group of women, and I am certainly among them, who wants to be willing to have those harder conversations in a way that responds to experiences we're having where halted, uncomfortable interactions require an extreme amount of calculus on the woman's behalf if we're talking in a cis-het mode of dating. And men are not tasked with making themselves uncomfortable and understanding how their role in a power dynamic might induce someone to feel uncomfortable and do something that somebody does not feel comfortable doing. So I guess I'm frustrated also because I often talk in the abstract, and we often talk in terms of theory and what is right and wrong, and it loses the reality of lived experiences. And as I was pondering what I was going to say on this panel yesterday and going about my busy day, I was groped on the streets of New York, and that will yank you out of a heady way of thinking about this stuff real quick. And I guess a lived experience that I'm comfortable sharing that I think on a personal level shows what I was missing in Aziz is I went on a date, and the man I went on a date with had failed to take my cues and begun aggressively making out with me. I found him cute. I'd kind of been waiting for him to kiss me. It was going well. I actually was hoping that he would kiss me, but once he did, I was uncomfortable. When he was on top of me, with me pushed against his kitchen counter, clearly bigger than me, outweighing me by 100 pounds. His only intention was to seduce me, and certainly that was where the night was heading, but I no longer wanted to be there. And the math I had to do in my head was, it would be, certainly I hope that if I said no, that if I raised my hand and said, no, I would like this to stop, that is what would happen. But I am unsure that that person who is being extremely aggressive would respond that way. And if he wanted to be physical with me, he would be able to overpower me. And I had to make the choice to pretend to be drunk. Oh my goodness, I'm so drunk. My head is not where it's at. With his hands still on either side of me, he asked, "Are you sure you're not just trying to leave?" And I had to proceed to do a performance of drunkenness in order to excavate myself from this situation in the way that felt safest, having to literally do an entire act of how I was feeling in order to hope that I would not incite a male rage spiral. And I share this because that's not so horrible. That's actually quite normal, and that won't even go in my memoir. The thing is, that's actually a very trivial experience. And I hope that we can get to a place of navigating individual instances where it's not about things being illegal or legal or right or wrong, and instead about how individual people are considering feelings, and certainly men need to shoulder more of this discomfort.
Can I ask you a question on that? How well did you know him before? Were you in his apartment or were you in
Joanna?
No,
you hear this question?
No, but I'm interested because I think that what's happened is this and I think this is also a symptom of digital behavior, that everything is accelerated and there is this urgency around relationships that women are supposed to deliver. And I think that the transactional nature of dating apps fast forwards actual communication and trust. And really what you need between men and women and women and women and men is a new level of trust and respect. And that's what's evaporated into the culture.
No, that's true. And Terry Crews, you are not only a star, movie star, an activist, an athlete, and a star of the Fox hit show, Brooklyn Nine-Nine. But you also came out, you were actually one of the first men who came out very authentically and very sincerely, talking about your own experiences on both sides. Yes. What is a man's take on that?
Wow.
Or your take as a man?
Okay, I say this stuff a lot. People have to understand that masculinity can be a cult. And when I say cult, it's no different than David Koresh, it's no different than Jim Jones. It's funny because when you don't even hear, the best way to example is slavery, is when slaves were yelling about, oh my God, I'm being beaten, I'm being hurt. The master would look at like, I don't understand what you're saying. You don't, it's almost like there's this disconnect, like they won't see pain. There's a lack of empathy. And this is what happens with men and women. Men who are in this cult, you can say as a woman, they talk, but a guy is not looking at you as even all the way human. And this is what you have to understand. There's a humanity issue here. You're like, why don't you hear me? Why don't you see my feelings? And they're like, but you're not all the way human. You're here for me. You're here for my deal. And it's real. I got a perfect example. Now, first of all, I have to tell you, I am guilty. I am guilty. I believe, simply because I was a man, that I was more valuable than my wife and the other women in my life. This is something that, men have been sold a bill of goods for a long, long time. Let me tell you, when I was in football, I remember one thing the guys would do is go to the strip club. And the guys would go to the strip club, and you sit there, and here's the woman, and the whole thing. And once she starts talking about she has kids, or if she starts talking about anything in her life, it's like, stop. Because you're becoming a human before my eyes. I don't want you to be a human. I want you to be an object. I want you to be something pretty to look at, but as you talk, you're making things too real for me. So scary. When I say that's a cult,
how did we
it's a
get
cult.
here? How did we get here? How did we get to the stage of seeing women as inhuman? Joanna,
No, and I think that's what happens with the dating apps, right? Which are fantastic tools to expand your social network. But actually, when you're just swiping through, people aren't real people, and it becomes transactional, and that changes the way you think about having relationships. And it's fantastic to hear a man saying this stuff, because women instinctively know it, but it's very hard for men to say it. And I think, I'm so sorry for what happened to you, and we were talking backstage, and you were telling me about it, but to hear you say that right now is super powerful.
Well, let's talk about how did we get here? Because for me, we did not get here by coincidence. We have been bombarded with objectification of women all over us, in the porn industry, in the music industry, in the gaming industry. It's all over the place. So do you think we've been socialized to dehumanize women, and to actually, for women, to socialize to be the nice women, and we're having a hard time to say no, absolutely not. Joanna, you say actually porn is like chewing gum, it's all artificial flavor in your book.
Well, one of my great anxieties is the ubiquity of porn on digital devices, and that it's become the de facto sex education for an entire generation of young men and young women. And when I was at Cosmo and when I was at Marie Claire, the common complaint we would hear was that men, when they eventually got to bed together, and there's an element of this in the story I think you told, that men want women to behave like porn stars, which also goes back to what you were saying about the strip club, and that young women felt they had to behave like porn stars. And of course, porn sex isn't real sex. Porn sex is made for a camera, it's shot from certain angles, and those angles aren't very comfortable in real life. And so what I'm trying to convey in the book is that sex should be one of the great, great things. It's what great art is written about: passion, love. It's the best books, it's the best music, and we've forgotten about it. And it's the stuff that actually makes us alive. And the most interesting thing is that the single thing other than your DNA, and all studies show this, that will guarantee you a longer and happy life is the quality of your relationships, who you love and who loves you back. And that requires generosity on your behalf. It requires the ability to listen to someone, to communicate with them. And between, couples that love each other, great sex, it's free, it's fun, and it makes you feel better. And we've just sort of become, I think, a culture in which it's become super transactional and super commoditized. And I think that's a terrible shame.
Well, first of all, yes. First of all, I just want to say I am so sorry for what happened to you.
Oh, that's okay.
No, it's real, because this is what's so dangerous and scary, is that, what's wild is that love.
But I guess I want to emphasize, the point of that story is that it wasn't some horrible traumatic thing that I have those. This was not one of those. And I think that what we're missing it a lot. I also wanted to build off something, the the transactional mode of dating apps is very real. I mean, we've been humans for hundreds of thousands of years, and we've had the internet for like 1 minute relative to that. And we definitely lose some things in communication, but it does come down to men having to shoulder more uncomfortability in that regard. And also just quickly on the porn point, and then I'll let you go back. I think the formulation of understanding porn as automatically, simplistically a degrading thing that makes men want to come on their girlfriends' faces or whatever, like, it's a little simplistic sometimes, because like there's some porn that I find really hot, you know? Like there's some things that happen in porn that are framed as degrading that women enjoy sometimes. And I think sexuality doesn't have to become, like, the bedroom is not an egalitarian space, and like I don't have to live my feminist like theory while I'm getting fucked. Like, that's okay. And I think that if we could actually just, you know, we could move to this understanding that like sexuality is not a coin to be traded, it's a renewable resource, and we could all just be positive and work towards enthusiastic consent, I think we could all be having a lot better sex.
I hear you.
Yeah, I mean, because you talked about your own addiction to porn at one point.
Yes. Now, and my response to that, though, is that, first of all, the problem is love and sex have been thrown around as the same thing. And they're not. That's the biggest thing. And you got to understand how guys think. Guys know that if they keep talking about love to you, then that will spark sex. When they're not talking about love, they don't want love. See,
really?
Listen, I'm gonna tell you what. First of all, I grew up in the African American community has a thing. It's pimp culture. I remember being 13 years old and asking a guy about, this is girl I like. And they were like, he was like, hey man, lie to her, man. Lie to her. Tell her you love her. This was game. It was called game. You had to have game. The whole point was to trick the woman. That was the whole MO, was to get sex and run. That's the game. But this is the thing though, when you use love and sex and you throw it all around, but this is the deal. And this is what I found out. All men want intimacy. We all want intimacy. We want people to know us for who we are and love us, know the good and the bad all about us and love us anyway. That's true intimacy. But the problem is when you put sex before the intimacy, guys don't reveal themselves. They won't show you, so you'll never be intimate, and a guy will never get what he needs, so he's constantly chasing this sex. And it becomes a huge issue because the woman is not hearing the signal, because you speak two different languages. Totally. It's like you're from another planet, and he's from this planet, and nobody understands each other. And I'm telling you, when you interchange love and sex as if, you put it in songs, you put it in all this other stuff, but you have to know there's two different things, very, very different things.
Why didn't I meet you when I was 15? I wish you told me this then. It's too late telling me this now.
But Joanna, as the chief content officer at Hearst, we all grew up with reading in women's magazines how to catch a man, how to flirt a man, how to seduce a man, how to do all of these things, how to look sexy, how to do all of these things. Is the content for women being different right now? And how is that so?
Well, before I answer that, I just want to answer Lauren's point, because you raise a really good point. And I want to be really clear. I'm not anti-porn at all. What I am is anti-porn as a default sex education. And America has terrible sex and love and relationship education. We only have 13 states where it's actually mandated that kids understand how babies are born. That is ridiculous, okay? It's ridiculous. Now I can't remember your question. What was your question?
The question is, and it's both really for you and Lauren, is how do we navigate between sexual expressions and our own power, sexual freedom, sexual expression, and between sometimes we objectify ourselves as well, or are we objectifying ourselves? And in your case, it would be in the written content. In Lauren's case, my question is in all the social media, actually both of you, social media with women taking selfies and all of these things. So where's the line and how do we navigate between self-imposed objectification and between our own sexual freedom?
I mean, that's the impossible question. It's like the struggle of feminism in modern life is practically living through like a theory that is not what matches my life on a daily basis. I don't think that I should spend an hour making a series of risky lipstick decisions, but I do that on a regular basis. I mean, I think in terms of a sexual space, it's getting to know yourself and just asking yourself what you want, it becomes, you know, we are women in the world, and we are, that's the name of the panel and event we're at. But we're women living in a real world, and we're having to figure out these practicalities and wanting to buy pretty dresses and spend time getting ready and getting blowouts and all of these feminized, gendered things. That's just another version of how are we policing our own sexuality, or believing our sexuality is filtered into this kind of why buy the cow when you can get the milk for free format. I think the way to get past that on a personal level is to really spend some time with yourself, maybe masturbating, thinking about what is appealing to you and insisting on it, and finding a partner who you can feel comfortable communicating that with, and not worrying about the theoretical ideals because we're not in the feminist utopia yet.
I think that's really smart, and I also think it's almost impossible. So I think two things. It's almost impossible to have good sex regularly with strangers. And the hookup culture, and I talk about it in the book a lot, it's really like eating French fries, where if you eat them off someone's plate, you think they don't have calories, they're delicious in the moment, but half an hour later, you're full of remorse that you did it. And here's the thing. We have oversold them the idea of the drinking culture, and what's fascinating, so we've got 1 in 5 women taking antidepressants. We've got between 1 in 3 and 1 in 5, and we've just heard your experience, saying they've been sexually assaulted. 50% of sexual assaults take place with alcohol. So this idea that we're okay with kids on college campuses binge drinking, the idea that drunken sex is somehow empowering, it's nonsense. There is nothing empowering and there is nothing fun about waking up in someone's bed and not knowing if you've been sexually assaulted. And the idea that we sell this in popular culture is a terrible lie.
It's true. It's way overrated also. Very true. Terry, you are in a group of thousands of women in here, and you just explained to us the men's perspective. What tip can you give us, on how to navigate consent with men as we are negotiating that?
I tell people all the time, men tend to be manipulated by pride. Whereas, a guy will come up to another guy and says, "I bet you won't jump off the stage." And another guy says, "I bet you I will," and he just goes running. And usually, there's a woman around to be like, "That's stupid, don't do that." And you see a group of 6 guys, they're on their way to do something really dumb. So, but what I'm saying is when you look at the whole, just the dynamic between, like I said, we speak 2 different languages. Yeah. And the way women tend to be manipulated is fear. And this is, again, I go back to pimp culture. One thing they would tell you to do is keep your girl off balance. Keep her always guessing. One day, listen, a pimp will give you 2 good weeks, and the girl will spend 3 years chasing those 2 good weeks. That's scary. It's very, very scary.
There's a term for this plan.
I'm sorry?
Well, I can't believe there's a term for it.
Well, yes, that's what's so scary. I'm trying to tell you, it's scary. No, guys talk like this to each other. Yeah. This is something you don't know. This is something guys will never tell you. I'm here to tell. Listen, I'm in trouble with every man in the world right now.
You need witness protection program.
Listen, no, I get guys all the time like, "Hey man, what are you doing? Be quiet." And this is real. I've had professional athletes come up to me and go, "What the hell are you doing, dog? Be quiet." That's why I know I need to talk.
Terry, what is the solution then? Because I completely understand the situation you're talking about and the sort of 3 years for 2 good weeks. If you're a woman, how are you supposed to resolve that? What do you do? Do you walk away? I mean, how do you bring the sexes together?
Listen, just like what I knew I had to do in my life is I had to kill my pride. I had to kill all pride. And then you can see things as they really are. Somebody says, "I bet you won't jump off that stage." And I go, "I won't. Yeah, I can't do that. I'm not going to do that." and all of a sudden, I'm smart. All of a sudden, that's a wise decision. Now, what women need to do, now I don't speak for women, but when I talk about being manipulated by fear, the opposite.
Exactly.
Be fearless.
Exactly.
Be fearless.
Well,
don't stop.
No, but that is true. I actually, the antidote to fear is own your power and say no and don't care about being nice and just hold
but there are physical realities to fear, and being the physical ability for men to overpower women persists even if I have a bedazzled shirt that says fearless on it,
It's true, but we also have power, and just because he is stronger than me doesn't mean that I am weaker.
But I think we have to reckon with the real physical power disparity here and the way in which that enters our calculus. I don't think it's something that can just be, that's beautiful the way you talk about getting past pride, but I think women actually have to calculate for living in a real fear, for not being able to walk home alone at night, for having to worry about what they're wearing.
And it's the most unfortunate thing to end this panel, because we can talk about the subject forever, and it's not resolved, unfortunately. I do recommend everyone to read Love Rules. We do need it. It's very timely, and thank you so much, and to be continued.